The diplomatic station floated in the darkness of space, far from Earth, far from the sun in the cold region near Neptune. They called it Harmony's Edge, and for 50,000 years it had been a place where the great species of the galaxy came to talk, to trade, and to make peace. No blood had ever been spilled there. No weapon had ever been fired. It was sacred ground. Park stood at the window of his small quarters looking out at the stars. He was 53 years old, with gray hair at his temples and tired eyes that had seen too much. Once, he had been a soldier. He had fought in the resource wars on Earth, had watched friends die in the mud and the rain. When those wars ended, he had sworn to spend the rest of his life preventing new ones. That oath had brought him here, to this station, as humanity's ambassador to the Galactic Concord. Behind him, the door opened. Admiral entered, her uniform perfect, her face calm. She was younger than, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and a reputation for being impossible to frighten. Beside her came Lee, the chief science advisor, a thin man with glasses who always seemed to be thinking about 3 things at once. "It's time," said. Nodded, he straightened his jacket and followed them out. The assembly hall was enormous. Had been here many times, but the size of it still made him feel small. The ceiling rose so high that clouds actually formed near the top. Representatives from 12 species sat in their designated sections, arranged in a great circle around a central platform. Some were tall and thin, like living shadows. Others were short and heavy, covered in thick armor-like skin. One species appeared to be made entirely of crystal, catching the light and throwing rainbows across the walls. Walk to the center platform alone. That was the tradition. When you spoke before the Concord, you spoke alone. The speaker of the Concord rose from its seat. Was its name, and it was one of the crystal beings standing almost 3 meters tall. Its voice did not come from a mouth. It came from everywhere, vibrating through the air itself. "Ambassador Park of Earth," said, "you stand before the High Assembly of the Galactic Concord. We have reached a decision regarding your species." Bowed his head slightly. "I am honored to hear the wisdom of the assembly." "Humanity has been observed for 80 of your years," continued, "since you first achieved faster-than-light travel and entered the greater galaxy. In that time, we have studied your history, your culture, your nature." The crystal being paused. The silence in the hall was complete. "Our findings are troubling. Your species has a history of violence unmatched by any other. You have fought wars over land, over resources, over ideas, over things you call religion and politics. You have killed billions of your own kind. Even now, you maintain military forces. You build weapons. You prepare for conflict." Said nothing. He had expected this. "The Concord has governed this galaxy for 50,000 years through reason consensus," said. "We do not fight. We do not kill. We solve our differences through logic and negotiation. War is primitive. It is a disease of young species, a phase that civilized beings outgrow." "We believe in peace as well," said carefully. "Our military exists only for defense." "Defense against what?" another representative called out. It was one of the shadow beings, its voice like wind through dead leaves. "No species in the Concord would attack you. You have no enemies here. Your weapons serve no purpose except to threaten others." Felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his voice calm. "History has taught us to be careful." "Your history is exactly the problem," said. "The Concord has voted. The decision is final. Humanity must surrender 60% of its colonial territories to species that can use them more responsibly. Humanity must dismantle all military vessels and weapons. Humanity must submit to cultural correction programs that will help your species overcome its violent tendencies." The words hit like a punch to the chest. He had expected demands, but not this. Not surrender. Not the dismantling of everything humanity had built to protect itself. "And if we refuse?" he asked quietly. "Refusal is not logical," said. "You would gain nothing and lose everything. The Concord's combined forces number in the millions of vessels. You have less than 1,000. Resistance would be meaningless." looked around the assembly hall. 12 species, 12 civilizations that had forgotten what it meant to fight. They looked at humanity the way adults looked at a misbehaving child, with disappointment and mild annoyance. "I request time to consult with my government," said. "Granted, you have 72 of your hours. This is more than generous." Bowed again and walked out of the hall. His legs felt weak, but he did not let it show. Back on the ship, was already pulling up tactical displays. Was running calculations on his tablet, his face pale. "They're not bluffing about the numbers," said. "We're looking at 8,000 ships minimum if they commit their primary fleets." "We have 873 combat-ready vessels," added. "The mathematics are not favorable." Sat down heavily. "Get me a secure channel to Earth. The Council needs to hear this." The next 72 hours were the longest of his life. The United Terran Council debated without sleep. Some members argued for compliance. What choice did they have? Others pushed for negotiation, for compromise. But then his team intercepted communications that changed everything. The Conquered was not waiting for humanity's answer. 3 species had already begun moving their fleets toward human space. The cultural correction programs were already designed. They planned to enforce compliance no matter what humanity decided. The choice was an illusion. When returned to the assembly hall, the representatives looked pleased. They expected submission. They expected the primitive humans to see reason at last. Ambassador said, "What is humanity's response?" Stood straight. He thought of his daughter back on Earth, just 7 years old. He thought of every human who had ever fought and died so that the next generation could live free. "Humanity declines," he said. The silence that followed was absolute. Several representatives actually moved backward, as if had said something physically dangerous. "You decline." His voice carried something new: confusion, disbelief. "No species has ever declined reasoned consensus." "Then we will be the first." "You would choose conflict over reason. You would choose destruction over peace." Looked directly at the crystal being. "You mistake our desire for peace as weakness. You mistake our patience as fear. You think because we want to avoid war, we cannot fight one." He paused. "You have made an error you will come to regret." Then he turned and walked out of the hall, leaving 12 species in stunned silence, not knowing that they had just made the worst mistake in the history of the galaxy. 3 months passed after Ambassador Park walked out of the assembly hall. 3 months of silence from the Galactic Conquered. 3 months that humanity used to prepare. The Conquered's pacification fleet entered human space on a Tuesday morning, Earth time. 8,200 vessels, gathered from 5 different species, arranged in a formation that stretched across millions of kilometers. It was the largest military force assembled in 10,000 years. The commanders of this fleet had studied ancient records to learn how to conduct war. They had practiced formations. They had run simulations. They believed they were ready. Captain Shin stood on the bridge of the TSS Defiance, a destroyer that suddenly seemed very small compared to what was coming. She was 38 years old, with black hair cut short and a scar on her left cheek from a training accident years ago. Her crew of 240 trusted her completely. She hoped she deserved that trust. "Contact confirmed," her sensor officer reported. 8,000 plus signatures. They're not trying to hide. "Why would they?" said quietly. "They think this is already over." Her communications panel lit up. Admiral's face appeared on screen, broadcast from the command ship far behind the front lines. "Captain Shin, your orders are simple. Delay them. Buy us time." "Understood, Admiral. How much time do you need?" "As much as you can give us." Nodded. She did not ask what the time was for. She did not need to know. Her job was to hold the line. The Defiance was one of 47 ships positioned at the outer edge of the belt, that dark region of ice and rock at the edge of the solar system. 47 ships against 8,000. The numbers made no sense, but had studied history. She knew about Thermopylae, about the Alamo, about all the times small forces had stood against impossible odds. Sometimes they lost, sometimes they won, but they always made the enemy pay. "All ships, this is Captain Shin," she broadcast to her small fleet. "We know what we're facing. We know the odds, but those ships out there, they've never fought a real battle. They've never bled. They don't know what it costs." She paused. "We do, and that's our advantage. Make them earn every kilometer. Make them remember this day forever." The conquered fleet advanced in perfect formation, like a wall of metal moving through space. Their commanders expected the human ships to run. When they didn't, there was confusion. Why weren't the primitives fleeing? The answer came in fire and light. Human ships were smaller than conquered vessels, but they were faster, much faster. They did not fight in neat lines like the conquered expected. They scattered, they regrouped, they attacked from angles that shouldn't have been possible. Their weapons, developed in secret over decades, tore through conquered shields like paper. The first hour of the Battle of the Belt cost the conquered 60 ships. They had expected to lose none. Commanded from the center of the chaos, her voice calm even as her ship shook from enemy fire. She had trained her whole life for this moment. Every simulation, every drill, every sleepless night studying tactics from Earth's bloody history. It all came down to this. Hard to port, target their engine sections. The Defiant spun and fired. A conquered cruiser 3 times her size went dark, its engines destroyed. "They're adapting," her tactical officer warned, "trying to box us in." Then we changed the pattern. Signal Group 7 to pull back, Groups 3 and 4 to flank left. The battle continued for 6 hours. 6 hours of constant movement, constant firing, constant death. Human ships were destroyed. Crews died in the cold vacuum of space. But for every human ship lost, they took 2 or 3 conquered vessels with them. The conquered commanders were experienced administrators, skilled negotiators, masters of political strategy. But they had never faced an enemy that refused to follow logical patterns. Every time they thought they understood human tactics, the humans changed. Every time they prepared for one attack, a different one came. Halfway through the battle, the Defiance took a direct hit to its reactor core. Alarms screamed throughout the ship. Smoke filled the corridors. "Damage report," ordered, gripping her command chair as the ship lurched. "Reactor breach in progress. We have maybe 20 minutes before it goes critical. Engines are at 30%, weapons mostly offline." Looked at her bridge crew, young faces, scared but determined. They had followed her into this hell. They deserved a chance to live. "All hands abandon ship," she announced. "Get to the escape pods, that's an order." "Captain," her first officer looked at her. "What about you?" "Someone has to fly this thing, and I have one more job to do." She waited until the pods launched, watching them streak away toward friendly ships. Then she turned the Defiance toward the center of the conquered formation, where the command carrier sat like a fat spider in a web of smaller vessels. Her fingers moved across the controls. The ship groaned as she pushed the damaged engines to maximum. The conquered commander of the carrier saw her coming. He ordered evasive action, but his ship was massive, designed for comfort and command, not combat. It turned too slowly. The Defiance hit the carrier at full speed. The reactor, already critical, exploded on impact. The explosion was so large it consumed 11 nearby conquered ships in a chain reaction of fire and debris. Shin died in that moment, but she took over 3,000 enemy soldiers with her. When the battle finally ended, the conquered had lost 400 ships. Humanity had lost 300. By pure numbers, it seemed like a conquered victory, but the conquered fleet was retreating. Their command structure was shattered. Their confidence was broken. They had expected to crush humanity in hours. Instead, they had been hurt in ways they didn't know were possible. Back on Earth, the news spread fast. Captain Shin became a hero overnight. Her name was spoken with respect and tears. Schools would be named after her. Songs would be written about her sacrifice. But more important than the fame was the message her death sent to the galaxy. A who studied alien cultures gave an interview that was broadcast across all channels, including ones the Conquered monitored. "The Conquered made a mistake," she said, her voice steady. "They thought they understood war because they read about it in old records. They thought they could learn combat from simulations and history books." She shook her head. "They don't understand. Those species evolved past conflict. They left it behind like a snake leaves its old skin. But humanity, we evolve through conflict. War is in our blood, in our bones, in the very structure of our societies. Every strategy they use against us, we've already used against ourselves 1,000 times. Every trick, every trap, every tactic, we invented them, we perfected them, we survived them." She looked directly at the camera. "They're not fighting our fleet. They're fighting 10,000 years of human warfare, and they have no idea what that means." In the halls of the Conquered Assembly, representatives watched this broadcast in silence. For the first time, they began to wonder if they had made a terrible error. For the first time, they began to understand what they had awakened. But it was far too late to turn back. 1 year had passed since the Battle of the Belt. 1 year of war that spread across 3 sectors of the galaxy. 5 species now actively fought against humanity. Millions of soldiers on both sides. Thousands of ships. Dozens of worlds. The Conquered had learned from their early mistakes. They studied human tactics. They built faster ships. They adapted their weapons. They believed they were closing the gap. They were wrong. On a small colony world called 442b, a single mountain pass connected the northern settlements to the southern landing zones. If the Conquered could take that pass, they could split the human forces in half and crush them one piece at a time. They sent 2,000 soldiers to do it. Sergeant Minyu had 40. Minyu was 29 years old, built like a wall, with hands that had done hard work since he was a child. He had grown up on a farming colony, learned to fix machines and grow food in difficult soil. When the war started, he had enlisted the same day. That was 312 days ago. In that time, he had been promoted twice and wounded 3 times. He still carried a piece of alien metal in his left shoulder where a doctor couldn't safely remove it. "Sergeant," one of his soldiers said, "a young woman named O, they're coming. Scouts report 2,000, maybe more." Minyu looked at his squad, 40 faces looking back at him, waiting for orders. Some were barely adults. Others were older than him. All of them trusted him to keep them alive. 2,000, he said, almost smiling. "That's only 50 each. I've had worse odds." Nobody laughed, but some of the fear left their eyes. That was enough. For 18 days, Minyu and his 40 soldiers held that mountain pass. They didn't do it through superior firepower. They didn't have superior firepower. They did it through tricks, traps, and something the Conquered had never encountered before: creative cruelty. Minyu turned the mountain itself into a weapon. He collapsed tunnels onto advancing troops. He set explosives that didn't kill but wounded, forcing the enemy to carry injured soldiers back down the mountain. He played recordings of screaming through hidden speakers all night, keeping the enemy awake, making them jump at shadows. When the Conquered brought in heavier equipment, Minyu had his people raid their supply lines, destroying fuel and ammunition. When they brought in air support, he hid his soldiers in caves so deep the sensors couldn't find them. On day 12, the Conquered commander sent a message offering Minyu surrender terms. Minyu's reply was simple: "Come and take it." The enemy tried. They kept trying. On day 18, reinforcements finally arrived from the southern settlements. The Conquered forces, exhausted and demoralized, retreated. They had lost over 300 soldiers trying to take a pass defended by 40 humans. They had failed. Minyu sat down on a rock when it was over, his body shaking from exhaustion. Sat next to him. "How did we do that?" she asked quietly. How did 40 of us hold against 2,000? Minyu thought about it for a long moment. Because they think war is about numbers, he finally said. They count soldiers and weapons and decide who will win, but we know better. War is about will. It's about how much you're willing to suffer for what you believe in. And nobody in this entire galaxy can suffer like a human being. Meanwhile, far away in a research station orbiting Earth, Dr. Han was teaching the Conquered another lesson about humanity. Was a physicist, 34 years old, with messy hair and eyes that always seemed to be looking at something nobody else could see. She led a team of 60 scientists tasked with studying captured Conquered technology. The technology was advanced, far beyond anything humans had developed on their own. Shield generators that could stop nuclear weapons, engines that could cross light years in days instead of weeks, power sources that produced energy from processes humans barely understood. The Conquered species had taken centuries to develop these technologies. Their scientists worked slowly, carefully, following established methods and protocols. Progress was measured in generations. The team figured out the shield technology in 4 days. This is impossible, one of her team members said, staring at the results. The principles involved, the engineering required, it should take years just to understand the basic concepts. Smiled, you're thinking like them. They build knowledge slowly because they're afraid of making mistakes. We build knowledge fast because we're not afraid of failing 100 times to succeed once. Within 6 months, human ships were equipped with improved versions of Conquered shields. Not copies, improvements. The captured technology had been taken apart, understood, and rebuilt better than the originals. The Conquered High Assembly called an emergency meeting. For the first time in their history, they requested a complete analysis of the species they were fighting. The report took weeks to compile. When it was finally presented, the assembly sat in horrified silence. The human body, they learned, was a machine designed for conflict. Humans could function with very little sleep and stay alert for days when necessary. They could eat almost anything, digest a wider variety of nutrients than any known species. Their bodies healed damage at remarkable rates. Bones that broke would grow back stronger. Muscles that tore would rebuild larger. But the physical advantages were nothing compared to the psychological ones. Humans formed emotional bonds of incredible intensity. They would die for family, for friends, for strangers they had never met, simply because those strangers belonged to the same tribe, the same nation, the same species. This made no logical sense to the Conquered. Self-preservation was supposed to be the strongest instinct. Then there was the concept of spite. The analysts struggled to explain it. Spite was the willingness to harm yourself in order to harm an enemy more. It was revenge that cost more than it gained. It was, by any rational measure, completely insane. And humans did it all the time. One analyst added a final note to the report, something that bothered him more than anything else. Humans enjoyed competition. Their entertainment consisted of simulated warfare, games where they killed imaginary opponents for fun. Their sports were ritualized combat, physical contests that often resulted in injury. Their history was a record of conflicts that, rather than destroying them, made them stronger. Every war makes them more dangerous, the analyst wrote. They learn from defeat. They improve through struggle. Pain makes them harder, not weaker. We are not fighting a species. We are fighting an evolutionary process that has been optimized for exactly this scenario. The report was shared with all 12 member species. 2 of them immediately began secret negotiations with humanity, seeking peace before it was too late. Back on 442b, Sergeant Minyu received a medal for his defense of the mountain pass. He stood on a small stage while a general pinned it to his chest. Cameras broadcast the ceremony across human space. "Sergeant," a reporter asked afterward, "what do you want to say to the enemy species watching this broadcast?" Minyu thought about the question. He thought about his soldiers, about the friends he had lost, about the long nights in those cold mountain caves. "I want to tell them something simple," he said. "We didn't ask for this war, we didn't want it. But since you started it, we're going to finish it. And here's what you need to understand. This is not even close to our worst. You've seen humans fighting for survival. You haven't seen humans fighting for revenge." He looked directly at the camera. "You really don't want to see that." 3 years had passed since the war began. The galaxy had changed in ways nobody had predicted. 2 species had completely withdrawn from the conquered, their populations traumatized by losses they never expected to suffer. Their citizens had watched broadcasts from the front lines and seen things that broke something deep inside them. Young members of their species refused to serve. Older ones demanded peace at any cost. Their governments had no choice but to listen. 3 more species were negotiating in secret with humanity, sending diplomats through hidden channels, hoping to end their involvement before it was too late. The great galactic concord, which had ruled the stars for 50,000 years, was cracking like ice in spring. Admiral stood on the bridge of her flagship, the TSS Resolution. She was 3 years older than when the war started, but she looked 10 years older. Gray hair, deep lines around her eyes, a permanent tension in her shoulders that never quite went away. She had sent thousands of young men and women to their deaths. She had won battles that cost more than they should have. She carried all of it, every name, every face, every message to grieving families. "Admiral," her communications officer said, "General is ready for the briefing." Nodded and walked to the strategy room. General was waiting, a holographic map floating in the air before him. He was 60 years old, with white hair and calm eyes that had seen more war than any human alive. He had commanded forces on Earth during the resource wars. He had helped build the space fleet from nothing. Now he was planning something that would either end this war or doom humanity forever. "Operation Homecoming," he said, gesturing to the map. "We've been fighting defensively for 3 years. It's time to change that." The map showed 12 human colony worlds that had been occupied by conquered forces early in the war. Millions of humans still lived on those worlds, under alien rule, waiting for rescue that had seemed impossible. "We take them back," continued, "all of them simultaneously." Studied the map. "That's ambitious, the fleet requirements alone." 1,200 ships, everything we have, met her eyes. "The conquered expects us to keep defending. They expect us to be careful, conservative, logical. We're going to do the opposite." The plan was insane by any normal standard. It required perfect coordination across dozens of light years. It required speed and surprise and more luck than any military operation should depend on. But understood, why had designed it this way? "We're not just trying to win," she said slowly. "We're trying to teach them something." Smiled, the first real smile she had seen from him in months. "You understand. The conquered thinks they know us now. They've studied our tactics, our psychology, our history. They think they've figured out the pattern. We need to show them they haven't learned anything at all." Operation Homecoming launched on a morning that happened to be the anniversary of humanity's first faster-than-light flight. Some said it was coincidence. Others said it was poetry. The human fleet divided into 12 groups, each one targeting a different occupied world. They moved faster than anyone thought possible, using new engines based on improved conquered technology. They hit all 12 targets within hours of each other, giving the enemy no time to reinforce or retreat. At Station, the largest battle of the operation took place. The Conquered's third fleet, 300 ships strong, was trapped between forces and the planet they were supposed to protect. They had nowhere to run. They had no reinforcements coming. By any military calculation should have destroyed them. It would have been the logical choice, the efficient choice, the choice that ended the threat permanently. Instead, she opened communications. "Conquered Third Fleet," her voice broadcast across all channels, calm and clear. "This is Admiral of the Terran Space Force. You are surrounded. Your defeat is certain, but it does not have to be your death." On the bridge of the conquered flagship, Commander, a being of blue scales and ancient eyes, listened in disbelief. "We have the ability to destroy you here," continued. "We choose not to. This is not weakness. This is strength. We fight to protect our people, not to murder yours. Surrender your vessels and your crews will be returned to their unharmed. You have my word." Silence stretched across the void of space. Hundreds of ships, human and alien, waited to see what would happen next. Thought about his crew. 3,000 beings who had families, who had lives waiting for them back home. They had joined the fleet because their government told them to, because they believed they were serving the greater good of the galaxy. They had not asked to die in a war that made less sense with each passing day. "How can I trust your word?" finally responded. "Your species is known for violence, for cruelty." "My species is known for winning wars," said. "We are also known for keeping promises. Check your histories. When humans give their word, they keep it, even to enemies." More silence. Then, one by one, conquered ships began powering down their weapons. 70% of the enemy fleet surrendered within the hour. Was true to her word. Every prisoner was treated with respect, given food and medical care, and eventually returned to their home worlds. Many of them carried stories with them, stories about humans who could have killed them but didn't. Stories that spread through conquered space like seeds in fertile ground. Ambassador Park, older now and tired beyond words, made a broadcast to the entire galaxy. "You feared us because we know how to fight," he said, his voice heavy with 3 years of grief and hope. "You should have respected us because we know when to stop. We did not start this war. We did not want this war, but we will end it on terms that allow both sides to survive with their honor intact." He paused, gathering strength. "The choice is yours. Continue fighting and watch more of your children die for nothing, or accept that you were wrong about us and help us build something better." On Earth, there were no celebrations. The people watched the news of victory with quiet faces. They had lost too much to celebrate. In every city, in every town, memorials grew larger each day, walls covered with names, photographs of the fallen, flowers laid by weeping families. Returned home after station and visited one of these memorials. She found the name of Captain Shin, the woman who had died in the first battle, the sacrifice that had shown the galaxy what humans were capable of. She stood there for a long time, saying nothing. A young soldier approached her, maybe 20 years old, fresh from training. "Admiral," he said nervously, "what happens now? Did we win?" Looked at the wall of names, so many dead, so many families broken, so many futures erased. "We survived," she said finally. "That's not the same as winning. Winning means this never happens again. We haven't won yet." She turned to face the young man. "But we're closer than we were yesterday, and tomorrow we'll be closer still." Across the galaxy, the remaining conquered species watched and debated. Some wanted to continue the war. Others demanded peace. The alliance that had stood for 50,000 years was dying, and everyone knew it. Something new was being born in its place. What it would become, no one could say yet, but humanity would be part of it. This time, they would be ready. The war ended 4 years after it began, not with a final battle, but with a signature on a document. The Treaty of Saul was signed aboard Harmony's Edge, the same station where Ambassador Park had first refused the Conquered's demands. The irony was not lost on anyone. Representatives from 9 species gathered in the Great Assembly Hall, some eager, some reluctant, all aware that the galaxy they had known was gone forever. The Galactic Concord had officially dissolved. In its place, something new was being created, the Galactic Commonwealth. President represented humanity at the signing. She was 51 years old, with steel-gray hair and the kind of face that had seen hard times but never stopped fighting. She had been elected during the second year of the war, chosen because the people of Earth needed someone who would not break, no matter what came. Before she signed, she addressed the gathered species. 4 years ago, you called us to this station and gave us an ultimatum, she said. You told us to surrender our territories. You told us to destroy our military. You told us to submit to programs that would change who we are as a species. She paused, letting the memory hang in the air. You called us irrational for choosing conflict over reason. You said war was primitive, that civilized species outgrow it, that we were a danger to the galaxy because we still knew how to fight. Her eyes moved across the assembled representatives. Some could not meet her gaze. But here is what you never understood. Reason without the will to defend it is just philosophy. Peace without the strength to protect it is just surrender. You had forgotten that lesson. We remembered it. And now, because we remembered, there is a chance for real peace. Not peace because everyone is too weak to fight. Peace because everyone is strong enough to choose it. She signed the treaty. The Commonwealth was built on principles that the old conquered would have considered insane. No species would be forced to disarm. No culture would be corrected. Every member retained the right to defend itself. Disputes would be resolved through negotiation, but if negotiation failed, no one would be helpless. More importantly, humanity established the peacekeepers, a joint military force unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Officers from every member species trained together, learning tactics that had been proven in battle, methods that humans had refined through 10,000 years of war. Former enemies became students. Beings who had tried to destroy humanity now sat in classrooms on Earth, learning how to defend their own worlds. They learned about supply lines and ambush tactics, about morale and leadership, about the psychology of conflict. But more than tactics, they learned about will. They learned that the deadliest weapon in the universe was not a ship or a bomb, but a person who refused to give up. Admiral, now retired from active service, gave her final interview on the 10th anniversary of the war's end. She sat in her small apartment, surrounded by photographs of fallen comrades, and spoke to a reporter who barely remembered a time before the war. They thought our violence made us monsters, said. They looked at our history and saw only bloodshed. They didn't understand that our violence exists because we treasure peace. We fight hard so our children won't have to fight at all. The reporter asked her what she hoped future generations would remember about the war. I hope they remember the cost, said quietly. I hope they remember every name on those memorials, every family that was destroyed, every future that was lost. I hope they remember that victory meant nothing except that we survived long enough to build something better. She looked at the photographs on her wall. And I hope they remember why we fought. Not for conquest, not for glory. We fought because there were people we loved and we would do anything, give anything to keep them safe. That's all war ever is when you strip away the politics and the strategy. People trying to protect what they love. 50 years after the treaty, the galaxy had changed beyond recognition. The Commonwealth had grown to include 17 species, many of which had never interacted before humans arrived. Trade flourished. Technology advanced. Old hatreds faded, replaced by cautious cooperation that slowly grew into something like friendship. But not everyone in the galaxy wanted peace. On the edge of explored space, a new species made contact. They called themselves and they had been watching the Commonwealth for decades from the shadows. They were conquerors by nature, builders of empires, and they saw the galaxy as territory waiting to be claimed. Their first diplomatic vessel arrived at a Commonwealth station with weapons charged and demands ready. A fleet of 200 ships waited in the nearby system, ready to demonstrate their power. The ambassador chosen to meet them was daughter of the legendary sergeant who had held the mountain pass on 442B. She was 45 years old, with her father's stubborn jaw and her mother's sharp eyes. She had grown up hearing stories of the war, of sacrifice and struggle, of humans who stood against impossible odds because they refused to believe that impossible meant anything at all. The delegation met her in a conference room. Their leader was massive, covered in thick armor that looked natural rather than worn, with 4 arms and a face designed for intimidation. "You are the Commonwealth representative," the leader asked, looking at her with contempt. "We expected something more impressive." Smiled. "We find that impressive leaders usually compensate for something." The leader's eyes narrowed. "Mockery, interesting. Your species is as arrogant as the report suggested." "Our species earned its arrogance," replied. "What have you earned?" The conference did not go well. They wanted tribute. They wanted territory. They wanted submission. They made threats that would have terrified the old conquered. Listened to all of it with patience that had been taught to her by her father. When they finished their demands, she stood up. "Thank you for your presentation," she said calmly. "Now let me explain your situation. You have 200 ships. The Commonwealth has over 10,000 crewed by beings who know what war actually costs. You have conquering experience against species who didn't fight back. We have fighting experience against species who outnumbered us 10 to 1. She leaned forward. 50 years ago, a far larger and more advanced coalition tried to force humanity to submit. They had 50,000 years of civilization behind them. They had fleets that numbered in the millions. And we broke them, not because we were stronger, because we were willing to pay any price to remain free. The leader shifted, the first sign of uncertainty she had seen from him. "You have 2 choices," continued. "Join the Commonwealth as equal partners, contribute to our shared civilization, and find a place among species that have learned to work together. Or continue with your threats and learn the same lesson the Galactic conquered learned." She walked toward the door, then paused. "Welcome to the galaxy. We suggest you reconsider your approach. Humanity tried conflict once. It worked out rather well for us." The ambassador looked past her, through the window that showed the space beyond the station. There, silhouetted against the stars, floated the Commonwealth Defense Fleet. Ships from a dozen worlds, crewed by beings who had once feared humanity and now fought alongside them. They powered down their weapons. They requested time to consult with their government. 3 months later, they applied for provisional membership in the Commonwealth. In the archives of the Commonwealth, the human-conquered war was remembered not as humanity's greatest victory, but as the galaxy's greatest lesson. Some species chose peace because they feared war. They avoided conflict because they had never experienced it, because the very idea of violence was alien to them. Their peace was fragile, built on ignorance rather than understanding. Humans chose peace because they understood it had to be earned. They had fought wars that killed billions. They had seen the worst that intelligent beings could do to each other, and they had decided, not from weakness but from terrible knowledge, that peace was worth more than any victory. The memorial on Earth grew larger each year, visited by beings from across the galaxy who wanted to understand what humanity had sacrificed. At the center stood a statue of Captain Shin, the pilot who had turned her dying ship into a weapon to buy her people time. Beneath the statue, words were carved in 100 languages. "We fought because we loved. We won because we refused to stop. We kept the peace because we remembered what war costs. May this lesson never be forgotten." The stars continued to burn. The galaxy continued to turn. And humanity, once dismissed as dangerous primitives, stood watch over the peace they had bought with blood and tears and unbreakable will. They had learned something that the ancient species had forgotten. Peace was not the absence of conflict. Peace was the presence of those willing to fight for it.